01690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. 2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, birth rates in the UK are plummeting, and some think the answer is yet more immigration. But with 2.8 million people off work sick because of mental health, maybe the answer is to get people back to work. We'll talk pensions. The WASPy women have been campaigning again today, saying how unfair things have been, and they've got a fair point. Yet, we now have a two-tier pension system where some people are getting more than £3,000 a year than others. How can the whole thing be as unfair as this? And joining me on Talking Pints, well, he's been commentating on the television on horse racing for 40 years. He's negotiated with the IRA, believe it or not, and he's going to have some top tips for us for the National in a couple of weeks' time. Derek Thompson joins me on Talking Pints. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the Bank of England has held the interest rate at 5.25% for the fifth time in a row today. The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey saying the economy is not yet at the point where rates can be lowered, but he said things are moving in the right direction. Inflation is expected to fall below 2% by the summer, but the Bank of England said the conflict in the Middle East and disruption to commercial shipping in the Red Sea risked further price surging. The Work and Pensions Secretary is warning that Britain's acceptance of a mental health culture has now gone too far. Speaking as he unveiled plans to get 150,000 people back to work, Mel Stride said that the benefits bill was being pushed up by a sharp increase in the number of people who are on long-term sickness benefit. In an interview with The Telegraph, he suggested an increased public focus on talking about mental health issues had led people to self-diagnose. It comes as the welfare bill is set to hit £100 billion this year. Within the last half hour, we've learned that Irish Government Minister Simon Harris has thrown his hat into the ring to become Ireland's next Taoiseach, announcing he'll put his name forward to become the next leader of Fine Gael first. It comes a day after Leo Varadkar's announcement that he was standing down and would step aside as Taoiseach once his successor was appointed. If he is appointed Fine Gael leader, Mr Harris would be expected to formally be elected in April and would be the country's youngest premier at the age of of 37. Thousands of women born in the 1950s may be eligible for compensation after a report found that the Department for Work and Pensions failed to adequately inform them that state pension age was changing. The Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman looked at potential injustices resulting from the decision to raise women's retirement age to bring it in line with men's back in 2010. The Women Against State Pension Inequality campaign, that's the WASPI campaign, is suggesting there should be £10,000 in compensation per individual, claiming that the women weren't properly warned about the changes and they couldn't plan for their financial futures. Number 10 has said today it's dealing with a migration emergency after a record number of asylum seekers crossed the English Channel yesterday. 514 illegal migrants were picked up by Border Force officials. That's the highest daily number so far this year. And today we learned at least another 300 migrants were crossing the English Channel in 6 small boats. The government says it hopes to get its Rwanda bill into law by April the 18th. And the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has said today he's determined to deliver on the government's pledge to stop the boats. Meanwhile, a South Sudanese man has been jailed for piloting a dangerously overcrowded small boat as it made its way across the Channel last August. 31-year-old Kulfar Marka was caught steering the vessel with 52 migrants balanced on board, many of whom were forced to perch dangerously on both sides. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The medical journal The Lancet talks about falling birth rates. It talks about them falling across the Western world, but of course it talks also about the really quite steep decline here in this country. And it says that the only way we can deal with this is through open immigration. Otherwise, the magazine says, we won't be able to sustain economic growth. But they do concede that it will lead to staggering social change. Yet, an ever-increasing number of people are not working. They're being registered as disabled. And most of them are for reasons of mental health. And it's extraordinary. They can get an extra £390 a month if they register with mental illness. And they don't even have to go out and look for a job. This is 14 times the number anticipated by the government when it put in this category called substantial risk of mental health problems in 2011. And into all of this, the Pensions Minister, and I have to say, Mel Stride, full of marks to you, has said we should not let normal life anxieties be classified as mental health problems, and that the whole thing has gone too far, and he believes we need to get a chunk of those who are claiming these benefits back into the workplace. I have to say, it's not always that I sit here and agree 100% with ministers, but I do on this one love to get your thoughts. Should we get more people back into the workplace who are registered right now as having mental health issues? Or is that, frankly, just too tough and unpleasant in 2024? Farage at gbnews.com. Please give me your thoughts. Now, I'm joined by Paul Morland, demographer. Paul, give us the facts. Let's talk the UK to begin with.
Yes.
Give us the facts.
The facts are that we've had 50 years of what's known as below replacement fertility rate. That means a couple doesn't have slightly more than 2 kids. Technically, it's slightly more than 2, but effectively you can think of it as 2 in a world where almost all kids make it to adulthood. And that's been going on since the early 70s. And that's been accumulating a problem. It meant that when we joined the workforce in the 80s, there were lots of us late baby boomers coming through. There weren't that many older people retiring because that cohort had been small. There'd been population growth, but eventually it catches up with you. And that means that even though we've got sluggish economic growth and mass immigration, we are short of workers in almost every sector, and it's only going to get worse.
But isn't this a fallacy? You know, when the Lancet talk about open immigration being the only way to sustain economic growth, surely the figures we've seen, the economic figures we've seen over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, actually point out that mass immigration has led to a decrease in productivity, and that whilst GDP, the total sum of the economy has grown, GDP per capita, i.e. the individual's real wealth, during this period of open immigration, big immigration, is declining?
I think there are two elements. First of all, in terms of immigration, if we focused immigration on where we actually needed the labour, that would not mean the sort of mass immigration we've seen. We are getting lots and lots of immigrants, but they are coming for all sorts of reasons. Many of them are dependents, many of them are supposedly students. So part one is, if you want to fix this problem with immigration, focus on your immigration in that respect. But there's another angle to it, which is there are two ways of fixing this problem. One is, yes, immigration. The other is fixing the fertility rate. Now, we have never had a government in all these 50 years of below replacement fertility, which has had a view on this, a comment on it, and you may think, oh, it's only people like Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin and the weird and wonderful dictators, not very wonderful dictators of the left and right of the 30s who worried about these things. Actually, Macron sees it as a major issue, and you couldn't be much more centrist than him. So I think urgently and much too late, we need to bring the debate back to what about actually encouraging people in this country not to just say we're too busy, we're too important, we'll skim off the qualified labour of other countries, but we'll actually do our own bit. We'll raise our own children, we'll educate them, and we'll bring them into the labour force as you and I and a large cohort were brought in back between the 60s and the 80s.
And maybe encourage some who are off work on disability benefits because they're suffering from depression, maybe encourage a few of them to get back to work?
I think that would obviously be wonderful. I do think that we have a relatively high participation rate in the labour force. Back in the 60s, a lot of women didn't work who work now. Back in the 80s, mass unemployment, that's gone. But that's no reason to say, so now we've got all these people with these various mental health problems, a bit beyond my scope, but clearly where you've got a pool of local labour that could go into the workforce, everything you can do to encourage it to go in is very important.
No, it's a very strong point. And I'm joined down the line by Sharon Gafka, campaigner and ambassador for violence against women and girls. And, you know, we've seen this pattern, haven't we? That, you know, 1964, the post-war baby boom ends, but then women become more liberated, women go to work, women choose careers. You know, Paul was making the point just a moment ago that it wouldn't be a bad thing to encourage women to have more children. What's your take on that?
I mean, you only have to spend 5 minutes looking at the news in the morning to understand why women aren't having more children. You know, I'm in my late 20s, coming closer to 30, and my grandparents would have had children and been married by my age. But the older I get, the less interest I have in having a family. And that's because we are seeing things like the motherhood penalty, where there is a disparity between the salaries of women who have children before they're 42 and women who are of a similar education that don't have children. I think it's a 15% difference, and 80% of the gender wage gap is actually contributed down to the fact that women have children. And I don't want to have to forego my career, and I'm penalised if I do and I'm penalised if I don't. And then we're looking at a childcare crisis, many providers saying that they can't keep up with the demand, many people saying that it costs more to send their child to nursery than it does to pay the mortgage on their home. So I actually think if we want to have women having children like myself, then we need to give proper policy in place for those women to be able to maintain their careers and a family life.
OK, so if government was to say, right, this really is a priority, you know, and Paul has given us reasons why perhaps it should be a priority. And I absolutely get your point about childcare. You know, it's so expensive, it's almost not worth going out to work in many cases. If the government did find a way, somehow, of making life easier for those that wanted to have children in terms of the cost, do you think it would encourage more women to have children?
I mean, it may encourage more women to have children. I wouldn't encourage me to have a child. I think that there is a wider societal issue as to the reason why I don't want to have children. I mean, I very recently was in the dating pool, and a lot of the times there's a phrase now online that we call single married mothers, where women are expected to maintain all of the unpaid labour in their home and in their families and in the workplace. And then you're penalised by society if you can't maintain both or either. So I think for me, it wouldn't encourage me at all.
And Sharon, for somebody in their 20s, you know, what Mel Stride said at the dispatch box today, the minister, you know, overseeing pensions and work, he said that what would be just normal life crises that happen to all of us are now being categorised as being mental health issues, and there are financial incentives in some ways for people to go onto that disability register to get an extra £390 a month. And it's mostly young people this is happening to. Is there some way, should there be some way, that we say to young people, look, you know, you're suffering from short-term upset, trauma, loss, depression. It happens to every one of us in our life at some point. And actually what you need to do is pick yourself up and get back to work and be fulfilled rather than going on benefits. Or am I saying something that sounds to you that it's completely outdated?
I mean, in some aspects, I consider it to be outdated. I can understand that. Well, we have to look at what we consider the normal anxieties of life. You know, when my dad was my age, it was a lot easier to buy a home. If you went to university, it pretty much guaranteed you a graduate job. Not so much now for young people. And then when you're looking at wanting to start a family, it's too expensive. If you want to look at going on holiday, it's too expensive. The cost of living, it's too expensive. I can empathise and understand why a lot of young people are suffering from mental health problems. And when you want to access mental health facilities, the funding isn't there. So a lot of people are now turning to self-diagnosis. I mean, this is like, the guest said, this is very much out of my scope because I'm not a mental health practitioner. No. But, I've seen lots of young people who working in the NHS, for example, on the front line during COVID, who had to sign off of mental health illnesses because we weren't looking after them when they were in the workforce. And then their affordability to be able to live like an adult the same way our parents did is drastically different. So unless there's a massive change in the way that we look at young people, parenting, motherhood, and the economy, this is unfortunately how it has to be in terms of living now.
Sharon Gafka, thank you for joining me here on GB News. So to come back to you, Paul, Sharon making her points quite strongly and passionately there about, her choice not to have children, her point about the cost of childcare. And I guess she does have a very good point that in the 50s and 60s, most houses had one income and could live perfectly reasonably, not, in the lap of luxury, but perfectly reasonably. And now it's quite tough, isn't it, if you've got children, to run a household without both of you working?
Well, it is tough. On the other hand, why is it the case that when we have never been better off economically as a society, indeed all rich societies are having this problem, we say we're now richer than we have been, but we can't afford children? I do think it's about people's priorities and it's about what people want to do with their lives. I totally support the idea of helping women combine work with childbearing. In fact, that's absolutely critical. That's the only way we'll solve this problem. I do believe in helping young families with housing and childcare, but we need to be careful. That's a good in itself. Parts of Scotland have got quite cheap housing. Germany has very cheap childcare. Both places have got really low fertility. So we should absolutely be supporting young families. We should be supporting women to combine career and family, but don't think that's itself going to solve the problem. What we actually need is a real change of our priorities as a society.
Paul Morland, thank you for joining me. Well, it is a fascinating debate and it's one that won't go away. I do not believe that more mass immigration is the solution. In a moment, sticking with the subject of women, the WASPy women are out protesting today, but they are not the only group of pensioners suffering, I think, terrible inequality in our country at the moment. In a moment, we'll talk about that, and the numbers, I think, will shock you.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism and parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also,
be
it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, pensions are a very complicated business, but in the case of the WASPy women, about 3 million women born in the 1950s who thought they were going to get their pension from the age of 60 suddenly found no, it was going to be 65. And their complaint is they weren't given enough notice. And the Ombudsman today has suggested a level of compensation is awarded to those women. But actually, the WASPy campaign think £10,000 each would be about right. Well, given there are 3.6 million of them, that would be about £36 billion, which for a country that is running a very large annual deficit would seem to be impossible. They have had, I think, a bit of a rough deal of it, but that's not the only. That's not the only inequality that is happening in pensions. Well, I'm joined by Rebecca O'Connor, Director of Public Affairs at Pension B. Rebecca, I was always found it mysterious that women retired at 60 and men retired at 65, but that dates back from a very different world, doesn't it?
Completely. It dates back to a world where couples were mainly dependent on the husband's income and also the husband's pension. And generally speaking, it was enough then for 2 people to live off one person's state pension entitlement and workplace entitlement. Now, things have changed. As your previous feature was alluding to, more women are in the workplace now. We're still not on an equal footing, but, things have been changing. And I think the WASPy issue dates back to a time where there was this assumption that one income was going to be enough for 2 people. And so many of those women will have been in couples where their expectation, it may seem very old-fashioned now, but it was that they would have a pension income, from their husband, essentially. Of course, that hasn't always borne out because things change in life. And they have found that they have fallen short because their own state pension entitlement hasn't been what they were expecting. And of course, the age they were expecting to get it has also increased. So different time, but, the consequences are being faced now by those women.
No, and I have sympathy for them. I genuinely do. They should have been given a lot more notice than they were. Tony Blair told Frank Field 25 years ago to go away and think the unthinkable on pensions, and Frank Field did and got sacked for his trouble. So we should have acted much earlier in many of these areas. But, Rebecca, it's not the only injustice in pensions. I've had a few emails coming in from viewers over the last few months, and I was astonished to find that those who reach pension age before April the 6th, 2016... those are on the old pension, the old state pension, compared to the new state pension, and that there is a disparity between the two of up to £2,700. How on earth has this happened?
It's complicated, but we have moved from the basic state pension system, as you say. There was the pre-2016 version of the state pension to the new state pension. The basic state pension pays out less. The full amount of basic state pension is currently £8,000. When you compare that to the full new state pension, which is actually going to be way more than £11,000 in a few weeks' time. So those people on the basic state pension may be receiving less. Now, there are some caveats to this. People who were who pay the SERPS pension, which you may remember is no longer a thing, may have more than that on the basic state pension system. But if you were contracted out, you paid those additional state pension contributions into a workplace pension. And so you may have had more through your workplace scheme than you would have had through the basic state pension. So it's not the case that everybody who retired with the basic state pension has less and everyone who has the new state pension has more. There were some intricacies around the additional payments that could have been made, weren't made by everyone under the old system, that could have meant that people on the old system had more. Incredibly confusing.
Yeah, I can remember SERPS payments, and I didn't understand them then, and I'm not too sure I do now. But isn't the point, Rebecca, that to have a cliff like this, you know, that occurred in 2016, and for it potentially to be as, and in quite a lot of cases it is, I understand, £2,700 a year. I mean, this is an inequality, surely.
Yeah, it is. And it's something that I hear quite a lot as well. Like, why does my neighbour have so much more state pension than I do when our circumstances are almost identical in every other way? And, you know, you could have been born on the wrong side of that line and had less pension as a result of just, you know, being born a year earlier. So there is unfairness there. Now, there were reasons for the transition to the new state pension. And actually, when it comes to women retiring on the new state pension, they typically come out better off than they did on the basic state pension. So there is some kind of redress happening there, albeit slowly, in terms of gender state pension equality with the new system. But of course, the other thing was you didn't need as many qualifying years on the old scheme. You need 35 years now for the full new state pension. So, you know, you have to work harder now, but you get more. So, you know, where is the fairness? Where is the injustice? You know, I suppose on balance, maybe people end up roughly the same. The other thing is pension credit. So you can top up your state pension if it's on the low side with pension credit. So it's always worth checking eligibility there, because that can bring up the lower basic state pension income to something a bit more like what people who are on the new state pension are getting.
That's useful advice, it really is. And finally, on this subject, we've seen pensions rising pretty much in line with inflation for the last few years. But of course, the levels at which people start to pay tax haven't been rising. Fiscal drag, as it's known. So we're going to see, aren't we, within the next couple of years, an awful lot of pensioners dragged back into the taxation system.
Yeah, it's completely bizarre that we may actually find that people are being taxed on their state pensions eventually, with the rate that the increases are currently running at. So yes, pensioners typically have, you know, lower incomes when they're pensioners than when they were working. But as the state pension rises, and you know, whatever is the top up from the private pension, it stays the same. State pension rising means that people are coming over that threshold for paying tax. So many pensioners will be surprised by this. They may have assumed that they would be paying no tax whatsoever or very little tax. The amount that they could actually be paying as the state pension amount rises could be considerably higher than they were expecting, which could be a nasty surprise. So it's really important for those approaching the state pension entitlement age to just check how much their income is going to be, how much tax they're likely to pay, and whether they can manage that through the amount of income they're taking from their private pension savings on top.
Yep, otherwise there'll be some very unpleasant letters from HMRC landing on people's mats. Thank you very much indeed for guiding us through what is always a deeply complicated and, for many, upsetting issue. Thank you. In a moment, let's have a proper debate. Trophy hunting. The Conservatives put it in their 2019 manifesto. We would not be allowed to import trophies of things we'd shot or collected overseas. It disappeared in the House of Lords, but it's back Is it the right thing? And why are some African countries really, genuinely upset about it?
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow will feel colder for all of us. A bit of a damp start in the south and then a mixture of sunshine and showers. Low pressure is dominating, but it's actually sitting up by Iceland. But these weather fronts draped across the UK. This one in particular is doing a couple of things, bringing cloud and rain, but also introducing the colder air. The rain will trickle southwards through this evening across northwest England and Wales. A fairly soggy evening, and that rain spreading into the Midlands and southwest England by the end of the night. The far southeast staying mostly dry, staying pretty mild here, but colder air is arriving across the north. A chillier start here and very gusty winds through the night and indeed for most of Friday, particularly across northern Scotland, but also into the west coast of Scotland. Blustery showers, some snow over the Highlands. Showers elsewhere for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. A dull, damp morning across the southeast, and the rain may linger in Kent well into the afternoon. But elsewhere, it will brighten up. We'll see some sunny spells, but it will feel colder. Temperatures only in single figures across the north, maybe 11 or 12 further south, quite a bit chillier than it has been through this week. A cold feeling start to the weekend as well. We may start Saturday dry and bright, but the cloud will bubble up and expect showers on Saturday. Some heavy downpours, rumbles of thunder, hail showers possible as well. And look at the numbers for Saturday. After being in the teens for most of this week, single digits for many of us, it is going to feel a lot chillier.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Now, it's an emotive subject. Trophy hunting is a very emotive subject. Many, many articles, many campaigns and many newspapers to get it stopped. The Conservatives did promise in the manifesto in 2019 that they would. It went through the House of Commons. It got stuck in the House of Lords. Well, it's come back, and John Speller, Labour MP for Worley. John, you're putting back the same legislation, and that would mean that Brits who go abroad and, you know, shoot a zebra or whatever it may be would not be able to bring a trophy back. Put the case as to why this would be a good thing.
Well, firstly, because it's clearly the overwhelming view of the British public. Government said that in their response to the consultation, and indeed also were clear about this, as you rightly said, in their manifesto.
They were.
Went through Parliament, got stuck with one or two people trying to talk it out in the House of Lords, ran out of time. Fortunately, I was able to get a slot for a bill, and I'm bringing it back. And the overwhelming support is from the public. Now, just earlier, I was doing a programme with another channel, and you know, there in the background there was pictures of giraffes walking around. The public cannot understand why someone would want to go out, shoot a giraffe, pose on top of its dead body, and then bring its parts back. It's pretty disgusting. We don't really want it in this country.
Well, OK, no, you put the case with passion. Now, the argument against, and there is a strong argument against, says that actually trophy hunting doesn't threaten a single species in Africa, Poaching certainly does, and there are some terrible things. Loss of habitat certainly does. I'm joined down the line by Professor Amy Dickman, Director of the Wildlife Conservation Research Unit. Now, Amy, whether you approve of trophy hunting itself, you do think that it can bring some benefits to Africa, don't you?
Yes, I mean, I'm not a fan of trophy hunting. I've spent my entire career trying to reduce wildlife killing, but I strongly believe that this bill, as well-intentioned as it is, will actually lead to far more animals dying in horrible ways and will harm local livelihoods and will drive far greater threats to wildlife, such as you've mentioned, habitat loss and poaching. And when we talk about, John Speller there mentions this sort of public opinion around the bill, I think that strongly comes because the public and politicians have been lied to on this topic. They've been told that trophy hunting is a threat to species. It isn't. It actually can help protect against far greater threats, as we talked about, such as habitat loss and poaching. And it's really important that we are led not by the evidence around this. These are horrible images, but not by the emotion around this. These are horrible images, but we are led by the actual evidence and the weight of scientific evidence, which is clear on this topic.
Now, Botswana is a country, John, that feels very strongly about this, a country with a thriving wildlife population in Africa, which some don't have. And their government have responded by saying that they're going to send 10,000 elephants to London's Hyde Park so Brits can try living with them. And their argument is that trophy hunting and selective culling is necessary in areas that have got a big elephant population.
So they're going to fly them back on planes that have gone to Rwanda or something.
That's a separate topic.
Let's not get... See, and I do slightly always have a question mark when people are told, well, the public don't know what they're doing and they've been lied to, and therefore that means they've been gullible, and politicians as well. You see, Kenya, for example, is a country which has very much restricted shooting, and as a result, they have a very thriving population, but also they have a very thriving safari industry of people who go there to shoot animals with cameras, not with rifles and crossbows.
Botswana has both. Botswana has both. I mean, John, surely the thing that would unite the public is what is best for the animals. And the argument made in African countries where, you know, a rich American or British businessman will go and pay $50,000, $100,000 to shoot whatever it is, elephant, whatever it may be, the argument is that the revenue from that is what gives the rangers the ability, the money, the resources to stop poaching, which is what's really damaging.
A bit hard to say to the poachers, of course, you mustn't shoot these animals, but we'll allow these rich white people to do so. Hang on,
John. Trophy hunters are not indiscriminately killing. Trophy hunters are being told, right, that is an old elephant that's past breeding age, that's the one you can shoot.
That's very questionable because, you know, Michael Ashcroft, who's not only run a campaign but done a lot of research on issues, on a separate issue but still the same within this, of canned hunting, where lions in particular are specially bred to be shot in close quarters by people. That is appalling. And I'm sure we wouldn't want people to be bringing those trophies back. But there is another point you mentioned about the particular, say, the large elephants.
Yeah.
Elephants have a social structure. They have a gene pool. And if you're taking the really big, large elephants with the big tusks and you're shooting them, you're disrupting also the gene pool. And, and there does seem to be some evidence, and I accept that this has to be fully tested, that now elephants are now developing, or not developing, but those with smaller tusks are the ones who are surviving. So we're actually changing the nature of the species, and not in a good way. And we also know that, for example, with Cecil the lion, shot, and this is what really kicked it off with the public.
I remember.
Shot with a crossbow, took a long period to die, but there was real disruption to that pride of lions. And that really damages the species as well.
I did caveat it by saying you take out an elephant that was past breeding age. So I did caveat that quite carefully. Look, I think wildlife management is what we all care about above everything. I'm not sure that this bill will make people feel good about themselves. Whether it helps Africa, it's a hot topic debate, and thank you for coming in and putting your side of the argument with such passion.
And the public side of the argument.
Well,
The public are very strongly behind this.
As I say, the point is what the public want to see is thriving wildlife in Africa, and whatever was best. But yes, it's a minority. It's a minority sport, and there are all sorts of minority sports the public would ban.
But we did away with bull baiting. We did away with bear baiting.
Yeah, I know. We'll all finish up vegan.
No, we're doing all of those.
We will all finish up vegan.
The public mood changed because we accepted that these were things from the past, and they were barbarous things from the past. This is going to happen to trophy hunting as well. I hope my bill will be a small step on that way.
I would be surprised if under Labour we don't ban pheasant shooting and all sorts of things. And I think this whole debate is going to go on.
This unites the parties. And if someone on the right of the Tory party, like Michael Ashcroft, can be in the same camp on this...
No, I understand that.
This is an area that unites the public.
I get that. I don't support it. I don't think it helps. But I get the passion. Now, today, the government have declared a migration emergency in the English Channel. Would you, Adam and Eve, it? I was saying that on Twitter, on articles in the Telegraph back in August of 2020. But on top of that, we're now told that the 18th of April is the day that the Rwanda legislation will go through. I'm joined by senior immigration lawyer Richard Bartram. Richard, assuming this legislation does go through the Commons on the 18th of April, when could the first flight take off to Rwanda?
Well, firstly, I think they missed a trick. I thought they might delay it for 5 days and announce it on the 23rd. Good old St George's Day, but no, the flight is supposed to go off in May. Put it this way, I've been defending the rights of migrants and refugees for some 30 years. I don't think I'm going out of business very quickly. 2 weeks ago, we had a proposal to pay migrants £3,000 to go to Rwanda. This week, we've had the announcements as regards the utter mess made of the accommodation, moving people out of hotels into other accommodation, ill drawn up contracts costing a bundle of money. And so May, I think, is going to be unrealistic. The bill to get it through has so many loopholes for traffic. Well, we've discussed those already. Yesterday, yesterday, the 20th, 514 migrants entered into 10 small boats. Those are the ones that are detected. So the deterrent isn't actually working. So we are May. I'd be interested to see it and bring it on. We will see what happens, but I can't see any realistic prospect unless we have chartered the planes already. It's not long, is it, till May? So I don't think that the powers that be, who have made such a mess of the whole issue thus far, and this is my money, I'm a taxpayer, I might defend refugees and migrants, but I pay my taxes, etc. This is my money being wasted on this. So I'm sceptical. Royals like me will be defending it, and it isn't deterring anyone. So,
Richard, I suspect you're right. I suspect it's going to be very good for your business indeed. Thank you for joining me. After the break, thank you. After the break, it's time for Talking Pints. I'm joined by Derek Thompson. He's been commentating on horse racing for 40 years. He's negotiated with the IRA over the kidnapped Shergar, and he's got some top tips for us for the National and indeed for the next few weeks.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use
if you
it.
commence,
there's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like you earn it, you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's that time of the week, and I'm joined by Derek Thompson on Talking Pints. Derek, welcome to the programme.
Are you well? I thought you were.
For those that haven't watched Derek, this has been his catchphrase for many, 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 many years. Now, Derek, a little story says that you go to the races, you're still about 6 years old, and you pick all 6 winners.
It's true.
And I think, as a parent, I think this is the worst nightmare come through. He's going to think. So was it a love of horses and riding? Was it there right from the start?
It was my dad. He took me to Stockton Racecourse when I was 6 years old. And we went through the card. We had 5 winners. And I think we won £9.17 and twopence in those days. And it was great. And I was hooked, not the betting side. It's the horses side, the jockey side, the training side. It's everything combined. And I've spent my life going to race meetings around the world. I'm going to Dubai next week for the Dubai World Cup. I'm so lucky. You know, I'm at Newcastle tomorrow night commentating. Yeah. So it's great. You have to work for a living. I go racing.
It sounds good. You and you rode a bit too, didn't you?
Yeah, I rode a winner. I rode a winner at Plumpton one day about 40 years ago, and the guy who finished second to me is now King Charles.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Oh.
Now that is pretty cool, isn't it?
It's incredible. But Nicky Henderson, who trained the horse, who became champion trainer, he'd just starting off, and so I had one ride. One winner, 100% strike rate. And I said to Tony McCoy the other day, I said, what was your strike rate for Nicky Henderson? He said, 38%. I said, 100%.
Well, it can't be back. Get out, I went 1 year ahead.
But he said, yeah, but he ever wondered why I never asked you back for another ride?
And it was through, the early riding that you struck up this friendship with Bob Champion, who's become a lifelong friend of yours, and has sat in that very chair.
He has, yes.
On Talking Pints.
He sends his best, by the way.
Yeah, and that is an amazing racing story. I mean, for those that don't know it, in a nutshell.
Just incredibly, when we were 9 or 10 years old, we went to Redcar Races, and we were interviewed by John Rickman. Do you remember the old ITV? Hello, good afternoon, welcome to races. And the jockey didn't turn up for an interview, so he interviewed us 2 kids and my brother Howard. And he said to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be a horse racing commentator like you. And he said to Bob, who was 10 years old, and what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, I want to ride the winner of the Grand National.
Really?
He did. But the story, he recovered from cancer.
Yeah.
He rang me from America. He was on holiday. Didn't drink, didn't smoke, and said, I've got to come back. I'm not right. And he'd fallen off a horse at the last fence, chased after it, and the horse had kicked him between the legs.
Yeah.
And I picked him up at Heathrow, took him to hospital, and they said, you've got 9 months to live unless you have this cancer treatment, which had just been invented. And the treatment nearly killed him.
Yeah.
But he came back, and he rode the winner of the Grand National.
Yeah, in 1981. A horse that probably would normally have been put down with a broken leg. Amazing. That 81 story was an amazing story.
And the Bob Champion Cancer Trust, which was set up, he's raised over £15 million for cancer sufferers. Incredible man.
No, that is absolutely incredible. You've 40 years of commentating, and I often wonder what makes a good commentator. Now, there's a catchphrase. Let's hear it again.
Oh, you will. I thought you were. You know what, mate? The Peter O'Sullivan, greatest commentator of all time. Bill McLaren, who is my late father-in-law, he was the greatest rugby commentator of all time. And I remember when I went to see him in Hawick for the first time, and he took me into his dining room, and there was a massive sheet of paper, and England were playing Scotland at Murrayfield, and he had everything, and it was covered in all little tidbits about all of the players. A bit like yourself. He does his homework.
Do your work.
And I still do to this day. Say tomorrow night, I'll do all my colours with crayons, and I'll do them in draw order. So that's how I do my homework.
And still loving it.
I'm so lucky.
No, it shows. So it shows. Now, not anyone. The Nationals won by Aldenese. Yeah. But there's a flat race called the Derby. And in 81, that's won by a horse called Shergar, who was a very, very highly rated Derby winner. Went off to County Kildare to stud, potentially worth an absolute fortune. And then in the midst of all of this, the IRA kidnapped the horse, demand a £3 million ransom. The research parties all over Ireland, front pages of national newspapers dominated. And into the middle of these complicated negotiations with the IRA, somehow we find Derek Thompson. How? Why? What happened?
It's crazy. I was asleep in my hotel. I was presenting a programme called Thames Sport for Thames TV, and I was staying in London next to Regent's Park, and 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone went, hello, is that Derek Thompson? Yeah, I thought it was a drunk or something. And he rang back. He said, no, this is so-and-so from the Press Association in Fleet Street. The kidnappers of Shergar want you to fly across tomorrow morning to negotiate the ruling. What? I didn't go back to sleep. We flew across the following morning with Lord Oaksey, my old Channel 4 colleague, racing presenter. What a great man. And we went to the Europa Hotel.
And the most bombed hotel in Europe.
The most bombed hotel in Europe. And as soon as we walked in, there was a phone call for Mr. Thompson, and I picked up the hotel phone. And it was a voice I'll never forget. And he said, I'm watching you from across the street, and I'm looking out. And this was in the height of the Troubles. You wouldn't go to Belfast for a holiday, you know.
No.
And he told me, you go to this lonely farmhouse 30 miles outside of Belfast. So I was surrounded by all the press. So obviously the police were there. We ran through the kitchen, jumped in a police car, and drove. And we got lost outside of Belfast in the middle of the Troubles. It was quite frightening. And 3 guys in balaclavas and machine guns jumped out in front of the car and obviously stopped straight away. And the guy came round to my side. I was in the front seat, and he went like that with his machine gun. So I wound down the window, and all I could see were eyes, a mouth, and a machine gun pointing at me. He said, are you Derek Thompson? Yes.
What a question, yeah.
He said, we're the police. I said, thanks for that. He said, drive over the top of the hill, drive in the farmhouse, run it, we've got it surrounded. And it was the farmhouse of Maxwell's, the trainers. And over the next 12 hours, I think I did about 12 phone calls with the supposed kidnappers of Shergar.
Yeah.
And at midnight, the last call came through, and I kept the guy on for about 1 minute, 35 seconds. And the policeman was sitting next to me. And when the phone went dead, I said, did you trace the call? He said, no, the man who traces the calls went off shift at midnight. So, and then the call came through at 7 in the morning. The horse has had an accident. He's dead.
And was never found. Gosh, what an extraordinary thing, Derek, to get caught up in the middle of. Absolutely extraordinary.
Nigel, I'm 40 years on, I can still remember every...
I bet you can.
It was frightening.
I bet you can.
You know, I just wish we could have found the horse.
And like your great mate, Bob Champion, you've had a pretty nasty brush with cancer as well.
Yeah, I had bowel cancer. Yeah, not much fun. But it's amazing. Bob had cancer. I had cancer. And we both recovered from it. Incredible. And a mate of mine came to see me, and I was sort of lying at home, you know, feeling terrible after all the chemo. And he said, have you tried sort of going back to work a little bit? You know, I'm thinking, you know, I can't even get off the settee.
Yeah.
And I took his advice. It was a guy called Higgy. And I did it. So I started opening bedding shops, going back, just gently easing, and did it.
You see, I suppose if work is not really work because you love it,
that's the thing.
It's kind of a therapy for you. Anyway, now the viewers, I can't say punters, can I? The
You can for me.
The viewers. I was at Cheltenham last week. Didn't have a winner, but had a very good day. Lovely day. We've got the National coming up. We've got the big classics coming up in just a few months' time. What should we be looking for in the National, Derek Thompson?
There's a horse. Well, Corach Rambler won the race last year. Lucinda Russell trains the horse in Scotland. She is absolutely... Oh, you've got it already?
Yeah.
Well done. You're ahead of the game, Nigel. You're ahead of the game. And third in the Cheltenham Gold Cup. That's pretty respectable form. So Corach Rambler should be the one to beat. But as we know, the Grand National is a lottery. And then what was the name of the first winner of the Grand National? Lottery.
Yeah, 1837.
It's just...
1837. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, I believe you. I believe you. Lord Oaks, he may have been. But so that's the one we're going to look forward to. And Derek, you know, you're off to Newcastle working tomorrow night. Yeah. And you've written a book about your life and the ups and downs of that extraordinary Shergar incident. What's it called?
Too Busy to Die.
Too Busy to Die by Derek Thompson. You can get it on Amazon. And Derek, I have to say, quite extraordinary stories. What a life you've had. What a career you've had.
But it's good because it's true, too busy to die. Because let's get on with life. Let's get working. Because if you don't work, you don't earn. It's as simple as that. Same as you.
Absolutely.
If you don't get out of bed in the morning, nobody's going to pay you to lie in bed.
I'll be getting up early in the morning.
You're incredible. And you did this week. You've been to America and back.
Yes. Yeah, but you see, like you, I enjoy work.
It's great. Aren't we lucky?
We're very lucky.
And by the way, very good interview with Trump.
Thank you. Derek Thompson, thank you for joining me on Talking Pints. I wonder, Jacob Rees-Mogg, what Meryl Streep was talking about in the House of Commons today is really what Derek's saying, isn't it? That if you get depressed and get down and put yourself on a register of having, you know, a mental health issue when it's just the normal ups and downs of life, actually work can be a good thing.
Oh, I think work is a very good thing, and male mental health problems are closely associated with unemployment. I think when men are working, they are very happy doing it.
Yeah. Talking of which, what will you be discussing this evening?
I'll be talking about a new tax that's going to be brought in to align us with the European Union, makes goods more expensive for the British, a carbon border adjustment mechanism. It combines everything we don't like, high tax, mad greenery, and following slavishly the European Union.
Well, I think on the basis of that, that's just the first, and I might just pop over the road. Right, well, that's the end of my broadcasting week. I'm buying. Yeah. I'll see you on Monday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow will feel colder for all of us. A bit of a damp start in the south and then a mixture of sunshine and showers. Low pressure is dominating, but it's actually sitting up by Iceland. But these weather fronts draped across the UK. This one in particular is doing a couple of things, bringing cloud and rain, but also introducing the colder air. The rain will trickle southwards through this evening across northwest England and Wales. A fairly soggy evening, and that rain spreading into the Midlands and southwest England by the end of the night. The far southeast staying mostly dry, staying pretty mild here, but colder air is arriving across the north. A chillier start here and very gusty winds through the night and indeed for most of Friday, particularly across northern Scotland, but also into the west coast of Scotland. Blustery showers, some snow over the Highlands. Showers elsewhere for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. A dull, damp morning across the southeast, and the rain may linger in Kent well into the afternoon. But elsewhere, it will brighten up. We'll see some sunny spells, but it will feel colder. Temperatures only in single figures across the north, maybe 11 or 12 further south, quite a bit chillier than it has been through this week. A cold feeling start to the weekend as well. We may start Saturday dry and bright, but the cloud will bubble up and expect showers on Saturday. Some heavy downpours, rumbles of thunder, hail showers possible as well. And look at the numbers for Saturday. After being in the teens for most of this week, single digits for many of us, it is going to feel a lot chillier.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time is ticking on your chance to win the Great British Giveaway. There's a massive £12,345